welcome to Two Boomer Women. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. I've been talking with Boomer women for almost a decade now. Well, I guess I've been talking to Boomer women all my adult life. Reinventing myself several times along the way, though, but always focused on us, Boomer women. With this incarnation of Two Boomer Women, I'll be interviewing other women who have a message of interest for our demographic. If you want to hear about or learn about something specific, let me know and I'll find someone who understands us to talk about it. There's a contact page at twoboomerwomen.com. If you want to be a guest on Two Boomer Women, bring it on. There's an application form at the website too. Finally, this show is all about conversation. We women know its value. We know how to do it, and we must perpetuate the art form. So let's get started with today's show. Welcome to the Two Boomer Women podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. I've been trying to connect with today's guest for several weeks, but the timing gods and the technology goddesses have not been with us. Penny Stevens and I have been friends for about 30 years. We live in the same city, but Penny is originally from England. This means, with COVID, she's been unable to visit family. She has, however, been able to go with the flow, shall we say, and figure out ways to stay in touch. And I'm hoping she'll share some of that today. Penny, welcome, and thank you for coming on podcast.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's kind of fun because we can see each other, and I do this with a number of podcasts now that we're doing this all on Zoom, but I use my air quotes, which you can see and nobody can. And today, of course, you look glamorous in earrings and a beautiful outfit. And I have to tell you, I had to break it to you gently that we're just recording the audio. That's okay. Maybe I'll get a TV show.
Oh, good.
Penny, how did you come to live in Victoria when you're from England?
It is a long story. However, I had been living in Duncan, where I had been married and living on and off for 10 years, and had started going to university. And did the first 2 years of university through what was then called Malaspina College. But at that point, Malaspina College in Nanaimo was not a university college, so it couldn't confer full degrees. So when I finished 2 years of university, it just happened that that time my marriage ended, and there was no reason to stay in Duncan and commute down to Victoria to finish the degree. So I took the plunge and moved down. Not having any strings keeping me in Duncan once the marriage was over.
If you don't mind, could you describe your current family situation? And I mean, literally, who's situated where?
All right. So I am the only member of my family, immediate family, living in Canada, and always have been the only person, except for my own now husband and my 2 children. So there's just us, 3 of us, 4 of us. That is not my strong suit.
Okay, so I'll just continue on with your current family situation. Literally, yeah. Who's situated where? Because one of, you have 3 with you.
Actually, 3, yes, it was correct because, oh dear. We need to start that over. So, as it turns out, both of my children are now in their 20s. One of them, both girls, one of the younger lives here in Victoria, which is nice. I see her on quite a regular basis. The older daughter, ironically, lives in England, where she is very settled because she actually went back to England to pursue a master's degree, which she completed, and that led into work, which she has changed her job actually, but she is very settled there. So she's close to all of my side of the family and lives in England and has a partner and has recently bought a home. And so she's not coming back to Canada anytime soon. So I've always said that if I was a giant, I'd have one leg in North America and one leg in Europe, and my torso would be somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic.
If you'll excuse the analogy, like at the car lots where you see that big form, that big thing that just waves back and forth and touches the
Yeah.
ground
Oh,
on either
the blow
side.
up,
Yeah,
the blow up ad thing. Yes, I know.
yeah,
I forget what they call them, but I know what you mean.
yeah. So thank you for clarifying that about your daughter,
There's three of
because
us here.
because it justifies or it explains some of the questions I'm about to ask you.
Yeah.
Okay, if I can start with your mom, she's elderly, and you used to go and visit and help out whenever you could. That's been impossible for over a year now, and I know you have siblings and some care arrangements. What supports are in place for her?
So the main support is my much younger. I'm the oldest of four siblings, and I have two brothers and then a much younger sister. My younger sister, my only sister, is single and has no partner or kids of her own, and she actually moved in before my father died. I think when my parents got into their late 70s, early 80s, there were some medical issues that maybe she was more acutely aware of even than I was, and she felt at that time. She was living in Galway, Ireland, and she saw them more often than I did at that time, and I'm sure she saw some rapid deterioration that perhaps I wasn't aware of, and felt that they needed a medical advocate, and she was not in a relationship at the time, and she decided to go and stay with him. Whether at that point she thought she might live with him permanently, I don't know, but she went and stayed, and it's ended up that it's been permanent since then. She now works and has a business in England, and so she lives with my mother, but she's not there on a 24-hour-a-day situation. She is very clear in what her role is. Her role is to be there at night. She's my mother's medical advocate. She knows everything that's to do with mum's medical situation. My mother has Parkinson's and other health challenges. So Rachel, my sister, is there all the time. But we also have in place 6 days a week of in-home care. Somebody comes in, usually the same person, comes in 6 mornings a week to help my mum get dressed and shower and breakfasted. And several days a week, someone comes in at lunchtime to make sure she has her lunch. 1 day a week, one of my brothers assumes that lunchtime role and takes mum out, especially now that they can do that since they've been vaccinated. And then mum has other help. She has someone that comes to do her gardening, and that person has actually assumed a bit of in-home care on her gardening day. So it's sort of a patchwork quilt. Mum's in the strange situation of not being financially destitute, so she doesn't qualify for state care. So everything has to come out of her own pocket. So basically every cent of her pension is spent on paying support workers. The plus side of that is that she and my sister are in the driver's seat, and so they can determine who comes in when. It's not, as in so many cases you hear elderly people stuck in situations where they have no idea who the next care worker is coming in to do some very personal care. And consequently, mum has become very close with especially the one person who comes in most times, and the younger woman who comes and does gardening for mum. So in many respects, as one of my elderly friends here said, your mother is in an enviable situation. She may be spending all her pension money on this, but what else should she be spending it on anyway? She has her dignity. She's in her own home. She has her pets. She's in a beautiful part of the country. Actually, in COVID, it was the perfect place to be. She was not in a care home, and she was able to be really careful about who, well, especially with my sister's help, who came in and out of the house. So she does have a lot to be thankful for, but it's still pretty lonely at times.
Right.
Long answer, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. If memory serves, on one of our walks, you explained to me something about a phone thing that you'd arranged so you can talk to her.
No, I found out about that. It's called phone clicks or something. Oh dear, it'll come to me. It's an American thing that it's a smart thing. And it's a little thing that looks like one of those electric photograph display units that you just have sitting on a counter somewhere, but it's actually smart. So you can, as long as you've got Wi-Fi in the home and you have it set up, somebody knows how to set it up, it can then act like FaceTime, and you can send the older person like messages over it and this sort of thing, and you can actually speak to them and use it like a phone, a video or a phone. I could have bought one and sent it to England, but in fact, if anything had gone wrong with it, because it's an American company, they wouldn't support it over there. So I thought, wouldn't that be just brilliant? I'd spend the $200 or $300 that it would have been, sent it there, and then find out for whatever reason that it didn't mesh with the system there. I thought, I can't take that risk. However, and it is frustrating on the phone, because as with so many elderly phones, the weight of a phone is sometimes too much for them, and they lose it. Even with speakerphone, I need her to be close to it. Occasionally, she has an iPad, which she doesn't use very much. And occasionally we do actually manage to speak over FaceTime. And when we do, it's fantastic, because I can see her. I can, she doesn't have to shout. She doesn't have to strain her voice. It's just so nice to have that. But it doesn't happen more than once every 2 or 3 months at most. Yeah. So I've got to, because with her living in England, there's an 8-hour time difference.
Of course.
So unless I'm willing to get up in the middle of the night, phoning is really tricky, because I have to work around her nap. She has 2 long naps a day, and then I have to sleep. So I find that early in the morning, my time, it's late afternoon, her time. I either get her before one nap or after that nap, because in the evening she's already dozing and she's too tired at the end of the day. So it's really tricky, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, time zones are something we often don't think about, and we all have the same 24 hours in a day, so you sort of forget that, her 24 hours is 8 hours different than our 24 hours. Yeah,
or else I'll phone and her care worker is just about to take her out for a walk or something. I think, okay, well, I'll try in an hour, and then by that time I have to run an errand or something. You'd think now that I'm retired, it would be easier to fit that in, and to a certain degree it is easier, but sometimes days will go by and I'm trying, and it's frustrating, but that's the way it is. So I don't physically see her too much. Occasionally my brother will set up the iPad when he goes there on a Thursday, but he often tries to make that a day that he does take her out, even if it's just for a little drive to give her a change of scenery. But anyway, those are the hazards. I chose to live here, so I have to put up with it.
Yeah, no, the truth. So thank goodness there's a whole bunch of supports by the sounds of it. She's got lots of carers. If I can ask the personal question, do you ever lose sleep worrying about not being able to be there?
When my dad passed away, I can only imagine what it's like when your partner of 60 plus years passes away, and she wasn't at his bedside when he died. So I was there. I went within a few days of him passing away, but your heart goes out to somebody at that point. Yeah. The other thing that I would lose sleep over is my immediate siblings. We all realize that basically my mum is living in a house of cards, because say something happens to her main carer, well, that would really upset all the routines. And this almost happened last year anyway, because in the midst of us all being concerned about my mum's health, my sister was diagnosed with late stage 3 ovarian cancer, the one who lives with my mother. So all of a sudden, that was a really tough time until things settled down a bit with her cancer, because we realized that actually, we still don't know how long Rachel might live with her cancer. She's doing well at the moment, but we realized that we could end up with both my mother and my sister passing away in the same year, or close to each other. So that was a really tough time when that diagnosis was happening, and we were patching together other people to be there while Rachel was in hospital because she had to have a hysterectomy and stay there for a while. So that was probably the most critical time. Those two times, my dad's dying and Rachel's medical situation, definitely. And it's so far away, and it was in COVID, and I was thinking, do I just get on a plane and go, or am I going to be more hassle than I'm worth? And at that time, Britain was in a much worse situation COVID-wise than we were, because it was must have been this time last year. So it was right in the thick of it, the first full wave. And it was terrible. I was thinking, well, I don't think I should go. I'm just going to bring another level of difficulty they don't need to be stressing about. That was really hard. Yes, that was really hard.
I think your analogy of a house of cards is so good, because in so many ways we all live within that house of cards. You just don't realize how fragile it is until something like COVID comes along, where, if one of the cards starts to waver a little bit, there's nothing you could do to add support or change it or anything at all. Yeah.
No, and I think that's what my sister realized about my parents when she first moved from Ireland. As many of us of a certain age, if we have parents still living, people in our parents' generation gave blind credence to whatever the medical profession tells them. And that's not always in their best interest. And they tend to play down whatever is their ailment. It's like especially the British, it's stiff upper lip and I'm not that bad, dear. And Rachel would say, well, yes, you are. Like, you need support. They weren't acting in their own best interest to get any state benefits that they could get, because they feel like they should be independent and be able to manage on their own. And my dad had some medical situations that ended up with him in hospital, and yes, it was a house of cards even then. So it's even more so once he passed away, because he had been my mother's biggest support and been her. Although she had driven for years and years and years, she got to the stage where she wasn't driving very much. So his raison d'etre was taking her to her appointments and going and doing the grocery shopping. It so often happens with elderly couples, it seems.
Yeah. Well, and I can identify with that whole Brit mentality, after you've lived through the war and possibly the Depression, you figure out how just to keep on going, and
yes,
you deal with what you're given.
And you don't understand that there might be help out there that you could tap into. You just don't think about it.
Yeah. Next, 2 daughters. One's local, one's in England. Last I heard, your daughter in England had a public-facing job, as does her fiancé.
Yes.
Are you able to trust that they're both being as smart and as cautious as possible?
Oh, yes, very much so. They're probably more cautious than I am.
Oh, okay.
I find that with that generation in general, actually,
okay.
The millennials, for the large part, they, at least in my circle and their children, I found that they're more cautious than I would have expected. They're definitely more cautious, I think, more cautious than I've been.
I noticed that with mine as well. So the second half of that question, do you feel that England has done everything possible to support and protect its public servants?
I really don't feel totally qualified to answer that question.
Okay, that's fair, yeah.
I am, in general, the government was slow to act. Once they got on the vaccination bandwagon, they've really, really caught up. Now, I don't think Brittany or her fiance are vaccinated yet. Natalie might be. Brittany's fiance may be because she's a policeman. But I don't think Brittany is. She's working from home, so she's been isolating very, very carefully.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, as you know, my son Scott has lived in New York throughout this pandemic, and there's times when I worry a little bit about him, a big bit about the government. And I know they're all adults, but once a mum, always a mum.
Yeah.
Now, how about travel restrictions in Britain? Is Brittany able to visit her grandma, or does that sort of also become an issue of bringing city germs to her frail grandma?
I don't think she would go yet.
Yeah.
Yes, only very recently have they been able to travel outside of their area. Mm-hmm. So they had she went into London. Luckily, we were very happy that they moved out of London during COVID.
Oh, okay.
Brittany was already in lockdown in their flat, working from home, but they bought a home that they moved into in late October out of London, for which we were eternally grateful and thankful, because London was a pretty scary place to be at the beginning of COVID when all supplies were running off the shelves. They did, in fact, get a care package from Natalie's parents once or twice because, it was just ridiculous. And the whole supply chain kind of broke down temporarily, and people hoarded things. It was bad here, but it was worse in London. Anyway, since they've been in their house with the second or third wave, whatever it's been, they were in lockdown again, so they couldn't travel anywhere unless it was for work or something like that, something essential. But Brittany said it was about 3 weeks ago now they were able to go to London. So Brittany, actually the first time since they moved out of London, she had to go into London for a work thing one day, and that was the first time that she'd been in for months and months and months and months.
Oh, wow.
And then another day, they actually drove to Wales, a day trip out and back, because they bought themselves a puppy. They had to go and pick it up. And that was fine, but COVID compliant.
Yeah.
But no, she wouldn't go down to my family yet. Yeah. No. People are very careful. Yeah. And there's still a great hesitancy.
We've mentioned fiancé. Both your daughters recently announced engagements, so congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
Is anyone anxious to get the knot tied, or do you think they'll hold off and be able to make both events full family events?
There'll be very different celebrations because they are different people. Brittany in England will definitely want a more flamboyant affair, given that all of my family and all of her partner's family are in Britain, and that includes some elderly folks. They'll probably have the more formal wedding ceremony or whatever it's going to be in England. It won't be this year, and it could easily not be 2022, because as they said, everyone who was planning to get married in 20 or 21 are going to get married in 22. So there's no big race really for them to get married. So who knows? And then they'll probably come back to Canada and have some sort of a lower key fun friend thing for Brittany's immediate friends that she still has here. And we'll obviously go to England anyway for the main event. And then she'll have something small here just to include friends and close family friends here. Sylvie, on the other hand, much quieter person, quieter in her wishes for what she wants. Again, they're not looking to rush into getting married. It'll probably be latter half of 2022. And they've already decided they like to sail. And they have a little old sailing boat that they share with her partner's family, a father. And so they think of going on a day trip and having a very small ceremony at Sydney Spit on an island just off Vancouver Island, and then coming back onto Vancouver Island and having a small dinner at a restaurant somewhere that could accommodate, I don't know, 20 people or more. I don't know. All these ideas can morph between now and then anyway, so just roll with it.
I don't want you to talk for your husband, but I know Gil is I like to call him a rough, tough cream puff. Some men can sometimes compartmentalize really well. Does he ever have concerns over Brittany being so far away at this, like with COVID and everything else? Yes, he did, especially this time last year when we had no idea which way things were going, and she was living in London, in an apartment where you have no control of what's going on above, below, beside you. Yeah. How about walking his girls down the aisle? Is that something that's it's funny, I've got main event in my notes here, and you've just used the word as well.
Oh,
is walking his girls down the aisle a main event for him?
Oh, it would be. Yeah, he'd be a very proud dad to do that if they asked. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get personal again. Self-care. Besides a cajillion long walks, what do you do to maintain your sanity with your family spread out and concerns over your mom's health and your sister and daughters?
Yeah, I do try to walk a lot, obviously, as you know, and garden. Talk to the dog and the cat a lot. I try to foster not a head in the sand attitude, but I try to foster an attitude of, not it will just all work out, but I think someone said it's the Buddhist way, there's things that you can change and there's things that you can't change. And I try not to sweat the stuff I can't change, because that's a very destructive way of thinking, negative. And you get really caught up in it, and it can keep you awake at night. And it's not, we all do have those times when we don't sleep because of worry, but I try to just say, okay, I need to not worry about that. If I'm really worried, I'll just bake a cake or something. Feel like you're doing something constructive. That's probably how I try and turn negative energy into positive energy somehow.
Yeah. And I know you well enough to also know that you have an amazing garden, both floral and vegetables. So.
Well, it's a long learning curve because you never know. You always. It's a bit of a mess, but it always yields something. Well, it may not look pretty, but it yields something.
I will argue that mess part, but that's okay. Thank you so much for sharing how this pandemic has affected you and your family. These days, your family's physical separation is pretty normal. And I know there's often solace taken in knowing other people are managing as best they can and appreciate any tips they can get. So thank you for that today. Thank you for explaining the situation and how you deal with it and what's being done, both what's in your control and what's not in your control. And I think, whether it's using that term house of cards or talking to the dog and the cat or baking, like all the garden, like all those things that have just so many people have embraced, whether out of boredom or need this year. So thank you.
I also think of all the situations that I possibly could have been in, I wake up every day and I'm thankful, because I'm very thankful to be in the home I'm in, which it's very easy to isolate when we have to isolate because we're in a single family home. Very, very privileged. I am able to have a garden. So many people are not, even though you can be very creative with a balcony pot or two, but still. And living in Canada, I'm very thankful to be living here, and very thankful for my stage of life where I retired the year before COVID hit. So, and I was in the tourism industry, which was decimated as a result of COVID. So I didn't have not had to battle what so many people like your kids, Agnes, are battling, daycare and COVID protocols in the children's school, and the stress of all that is insane. I mean, it already is a stressful time for parents anyway, but when you add on the whole COVID thing, I don't have to worry about anybody except myself and my husband, and my kids are adults, so they're looking after themselves as best they can. And so, of all the situations I could have been in, it's pretty lucky.
Yeah. And I think just remembering that, as you say every morning, just remembering that little quiet thank you, that piece of gratitude is, huge. So
it is huge.
Yeah. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I'd like to know what your family circumstance is with distance and how that's created added stress during the pandemic and how you've handled it. You can leave comments at twoboomerwomen.com/join-the-conversation. If you'd like to be a guest on Two Boomer Women or know someone who'd be a great guest, there's also an application form at the website twoboomerwomen.com. Penny, thank you again.
You're welcome.
And have a great rest of the week.
You're very welcome, Agnes. All the best.